Welcome back to my YouTube channel where I talk about military topics. Today I'm going to be talking about something which is super hot in the military right now, and that is beards. As you may or may not know, in the military, we are not allowed to have beards. We have to be clean shaven when I'm on military duty. I have to be clean shaven, but I have not been on military duty for several weeks. And so you can see now I've grown this beard. And in my job in the private sector, Palo Alto Networks, we are allowed to have beards. Our sales director that I work with has a beard, and our CEO, even Nikesh Arora, has a beard. He goes on TV and represents the company with a beard. It's very normal, but in the military, it's not allowed. We have to be clean shaven. So I'm going to talk about why that is, what my opinion on it is, and what kind of the general state of the military opinions are, and why some people might disagree with me. I'll explain, of course, why I think I'm right. This is my second YouTube channel. My main YouTube channel at Wesley Cyber is for cybersecurity topics, and this channel is my military channel. It's called at Capitan Wes. I actually recently renamed it. So please like and subscribe if you find this content interesting, if you want to hear more about my thoughts on the military. So let's talk about beards. I actually was responding to a LinkedIn post recently by Michael Meyer on beards. He asked for arguments for or against beards, and that's how I decided I wanted to talk about this. I kind of wanted to just give a general idea to, especially for people not in the military, of like what's going on here, why does this rule exist, why are people talking about this? But I also wanted to, for people both in and out of the military, give my opinion and explain why I have that opinion. So let's start with, why does this rule exist in general? So the rule about military members having to shave started during World War I and World War II. During the increase of the use of chemical weapons, military members had to wear gas masks to protect themselves from these weapons. In order for the gas masks to have a strong seal against your face, in order to keep out all of the chemicals, you had to be clean shaven. It really helped to be clean shaven, so they made all military members shave. There's actually some funny statistics on that. In the Navy, the full shaving, it actually went away for some time, then it came back. So the rule is actually somewhat recent in one sense in the Navy in particular. But that's kind of a long-winded way of saying that this rule hasn't always been existed. It has always been in existence. If you've seen videos or old pictures, not videos, obviously, that didn't exist yet, of General Grant's army, you'll see that General Grant himself had a beard. So going far enough back, military members had beards, and it wasn't really until chemical weapons became super common in use that people needed to have beards. So the question is that still a thing? The answer is no. Gas masks now have improved, the technology's improved, and you can get a full seal on a gas mask without needing to be clean shaven, which actually makes sense in a wartime environment. You wouldn't want to be relying on someone's need to shave in order for the gas mask to be effective against chemical weapons. Of course, there's the people who make the argument that we don't even wear gas masks. Like my 8 years in the military, I've never worn a gas mask in an operational environment. I've had we call it MOP training, where I've had to put on the gas mask to prepare for those chemical weapons attacks. But I don't think that's necessarily a good argument that we don't wear them. I mean, we might need to because we are in the military, so I understand that. But the truth is that gas masks have just grown. They've gotten better. So now you don't need to be clean shaven to wear them. So then, why are people against this? Why do people still want military members to shave? Why are they against beards if the technology has improved? Well, I will highlight some of the reasons given on that LinkedIn post, on Michael Meyer's LinkedIn post, why people said that beards are, we need to get rid of beards and we need to make people shave. And there was really one argument that was the top argument given, and that was that it's not about beards. That was written several times. It's not about beards. It's about discipline and following standards and making sure that people follow orders. So it's basically giving a standard that people need to meet, requiring them to follow it so that they understand the importance of following orders and doing what they're told and having discipline. And my response to this, which I don't think was necessarily super well received, was I basically said, okay, well, I've invented a new standard. And that is that all members of the Air Force, because the Air Force is color is blue, need to have blue fingernail polish. And we're going to enforce that standard. It's going to require discipline, make sure that people take orders. I tell you what, there's going to be some people who are not going to want to take that order. So that's going to be a real test of whether or not they take orders. And of course, some people didn't appreciate this argument because it sounded a little bit facetious. It sounded like I was making up, just trying to create problems. But really, I think if you actually think about the argument, you realize that you could kind of say this about anything. If you're talking about discipline and taking orders and that you need to set a standard that people need to meet, you can really just arbitrarily set standards. You can say, yeah, the blue fingernail polish, blue toenail polish, you need to have, sticking with blue, you need to have blue hair, you need to maintain your blue hair color. Say people need to read 10 pages of a book every night. People need to run 5 miles a day. Like those are all things that you can, force people to do, and they enact standards, but none of those are required in the military. So then why shaving, right? Why is shaving required? And I think if you think about this, you really start to realize like, okay, you need to set standards that make sense for the military. The standard itself does have value. It's not just setting a standard and require people to follow it out of discipline. It's setting a standard that makes sense. And yes, of course, requiring people to follow it. So I think you need to evaluate whether the standard itself makes sense. And one thing that was interesting when I followed up with this was that some people said that they're against beards, they support shaving, but they will support beards. No, they won't support shaving anymore once the policy changes. So they're not really supporting shaving. They're not really against beards. They're for taking orders, which of course I am too. I have people who come in. I don't think that shaving should be required in the military, in the Air Force. I don't think that beards should be banned. Yet if someone on my team comes in with a beard, I'm going to tell them they need to go back and shave. That they're required to shave. And if they don't, if it's a repeat occurrence, I'm going to give them formal discipline. Of course, I'm all for following orders, and I follow orders. When I'm on military duty, I shave, but I don't like it, and I don't want to do it anymore. I don't think that it makes sense. So really, these people are advocating for following orders. And so really this argument that they have, it's not a bad argument about, it's about discipline. It's just not an argument. They're not arguing for shaving. They're not arguing against beards. They're arguing for following orders. They're arguing for something completely different, and they have no opinion about the beard or shaving, and which is fine if you think that these rules come from God, but the truth is that these rules were invented by humans. Humans created these rules about whether or not we have beards or whether or not we don't have beards. This was all invented by humans, and these things can be easily changed by humans, and they're not going to be changed unless people say that they think that it should be changed, unless people talk about it. As again, these standards were created. It was created for a purpose, by the way. If it's not about beards, then why was it created for gas masks in the first place? Of course it was about beards. It was about beards affecting the ability of someone to do their operational work. That's what it was, but that's no longer a thing anymore. As I mentioned, those gas masks have improved, so now you don't need to wear a gas mask anymore. And that's why last year the British Army just allowed beards, which I think makes sense. So they're understanding, okay, you don't need this anymore. The technology has moved on. And so now we can allow people to have beards. So it really is about beards. The people making this argument just aren't really making an argument about beards at all. They're making an argument about following orders, which of course I agree with. But that doesn't change the fact that it doesn't make sense to require people to continue to shave. So why are people advocating for this? If they're just advocating for, following orders, and they're just basically justifying the rule because it is a rule and not for any actual reason, then why is this happening? So if you're not in the military, what you may not be aware of is that the military has a very conservative culture. And I don't mean conservative in the political sense. I mean conservative in the actual sense of the word conservative, the root word conserve, in the sense that we want to maintain what already exists. I don't want to dismiss conservatism outright. I think conservatism actually makes a lot of sense in the military. I'm currently reading a book called One Bullet Away by Nathaniel Fick. And in that book, Nathaniel talks about how when he went through his Marine Corps officer candidate school training, he learned about how all of the manuals that he had to read were, the words that he uses were written in the blood of the lieutenants that came before him. And that's, I mean, it sounds a little bit drastic, but that is kind of what we're taught in the military, that these lessons that we've learned, these things that we're doing them because others have made the mistakes for us. So we're trying to learn from their lessons. And that's why we're very conservative. We try to maintain the lessons that have been learned. We try to maintain the rules that are in place because we think that those rules probably have been created for a good reason. It's probably a lesson that somebody else learned that we don't want to relearn. However, there is a balance with this conservatism, in understanding that in the military we need to change as well. There's actually a joke that we make in the military a lot, and I think some people might be familiar with this outside of the military, that we're always fighting the last war. And that's the idea of that is that we're too stuck, we're too conservative in the sense that we care too much about what mattered in the previous war, in the previous types of conflict, and we're not learning how to adapt to the new types of conflict. For kind of simple examples is we went from sort of mass all-out wars in World War I and World War II, and then we went to sort of regional conflicts where we're trying to quell local communist uprisings in Korea and in Vietnam, and then we try to move to counterinsurgency and counterterrorism more recently, and how each of those phases was different. And a lot of times we were trying to apply the tactics that we had learned in the previous wars unsuccessfully, and it took us some time to adapt to that. So that's just kind of a simple example or a high-level example of what I mean by we're always fighting the last war. In addition, Admiral Grace Hopper has a famous quote that the most dangerous phrase in the language is "we've always done it this way," and that is also a bit of a progressive ideology in the military that we can't just conserve what we've done. We can't just think, oh, we've always had to shave, which actually isn't true. As I mentioned, General Grant had a beard, but we've always had to shave, so that's how we're going to keep doing it because that's how it's been. But unfortunately, that general mentality is still very, very pervasive in the military, including in the Air Force. And so many of these people who are saying, well, it's not about beards, it's about maintaining standards, really aren't thinking about whether or not the beards matter at all. They're just thinking about, well, this is what we've done and we have to continue to maintain discipline that way. So they're really just, without using the words, they're saying, we've always done it this way, so this is what we're going to keep doing. And one of the people in there actually, kind of interesting, said, well, I support beards if somebody has a shaving waiver. So they've gone through the official process to to have their beard. So the person's really not against beards at all. And I'll talk about the shaving waivers in a second. The person's not against beards at all. They're just against, again, following the rules. Like, oh, I support it if they have the shaving waiver. So it's just kind of a silly argument to make. And again, it's not really even an argument for or against beards at all. It's an argument for following orders. Let me talk about shaving waivers quickly. So there is a process which you can get for a religious exemption or a medical exemption to be able to not have to shave, to be able to have a beard if you need it. And I think to me, it's just kind of funny that there's even that process exists and those people can still serve normally. So it's at that point, it's like, okay, it's almost an acknowledgement that we don't need to shave, that there's not like an operational imperative to do this, because otherwise there would be no need for a shaving waiver. So it really does show that you can just, we can have beards. And what some people might say is, well, why don't you just go get a shaving waiver? And there is a stigma associated with having the beard. There is a stigma with going to get the shaving waiver. There's tons of posts on Reddit about this, about literally people saying, they call it the price of the waiver or the cost of the waiver, that you're not able to go to certain events, you're not able to get coined, get like a coin is like rewarded basically by leaders, generals, and civilian leaders in the military. But also beyond that, even if a commander doesn't do any of those things. There is just a general stigma around it that you're trying to kind of get out of the rule. You're trying to get out of the requirement. And so really the only way to fix that is just to allow people to have beards in general. It has to be a blanket allowal. The waiver process, one, it's kind of silly because if you're already allowing people to have the beard, then with a waiver, then you're kind of acknowledging that it's not required. But two, there's such a stigma associated with it that it's not really a solution for people who find shaving to be very uncomfortable and unenjoyable. On that note, I will finally just kind of cover why have beards at all. And if it's not clear to you yet, I am pro beard. I do think that the military should not require us to be clean shaven and should allow us to have beards. Again, in my professional career, lots of people have beards. I think they look professional. Vice President Vance has a beard. He maintains it. I think he looks professional with his beard. But sure, I could shave, but I actually find shaving for me personally, it's extremely uncomfortable. And to make it less uncomfortable, not comfortable, don't get me wrong, make it somewhat less uncomfortable, it actually requires me to spend quite a bit of money on a lot of equipment and spend a lot of time shaving and just doing the kind of the pre-shave and the aftershave and everything else. So it's a lot of time and money that I would rather just not have to worry about. It would be a lot easier if I could just trim it. Just trimming it would be a lot more comfortable for me, and it would be cheaper and take less time, and it looks fine. When I go to business meetings, I trim my beard because I don't want to look terrible. I want to look professional, and so I just trim it. And I wish that was all I had to do in the military, and I don't see any reason why it shouldn't be. And I don't even have it that bad. A lot of people have, especially African Americans, have very bumpy skin right here, and so they'll have to get a shaving waiver if they want to do that, and they may be stigmatized for doing that, or maybe they will avoid the stigma and they'll just shave, and then they're going to cut themselves up a lot. And so there are negative effects of requiring people to shave, and a lot of people just don't find it comfortable. With that, I will just say one more thing. When there was the talk about women's hairstyles and what should be allowed there, I didn't try to forcibly put my opinion in there and say that there should be one hairstyle or another, because I wasn't affected by it. I didn't have long hair, and I don't have to worry about the bun, the tight bun. And I'd heard from women that gives them headaches. And so, I hope that, the new hairstyles are better for them. And so kind of on that note, if you are a person, male or female, who doesn't have an issue shaving, either maybe you don't grow a lot of facial hair, you don't grow any facial hair, or, you just have smooth skin, so you don't have the issues when you shave, I would just ask that you sort of acknowledge the fact that you may not be struggling with this, and this may not be a challenge for you. And so even if you have an opinion, you feel free to share your opinion. I just hope that you understand that for other people, this actually may be a challenge, and this may be something that really affects our day-to-day, and affects and makes it a lot more difficult to serve with, again, no operational benefit now that gas masks have improved. So me personally, I really hope that the United States military goes the same way that the British military has gone and does allow beards, again, trimmed beards. We don't want people looking super bad, but allows trimmed beards. I think it makes a lot of sense. Again, in the civilian world, we do this. So that's my opinion, and I hope that you have at least understood my opinion and why I have it. If you have a different opinion, feel free to put that in the comments below, or if you agree with me, put that in the comments as well. I'd like to continue this discussion and continue to talk about all of these types of issues, because again, these rules are not written by God. These rules are written by people, and we can only understand the best way to have our military and the best standards of discipline if we continue to talk about it. So thank you for watching my video, and I hope to see you in future videos.